long have I waited? Welcome back to Rebels Revisited. Wow guys, we made it. Some of the best content that Star Wars has to offer. Are you excited? I'm excited. This is Twilight of the Apprentice Revisited. This is so overwhelming, like how do I even tackle all of this? Anyway, in this episode, the time has finally come for Ezra, Kanan, and Ahsoka to go to Malachor. They don't know what awaits them there, only that there could be knowledge that will help them destroy the Sith, and that they'll likely run into danger. Before we set off for Malachor, I really want to point out Rex and Ahsoka's conversation that kicks off the episode.
Ahsoka, you don't have to go to Malachor alone. I could be there in 2 rotations.
I'm not alone, Rex.
You know, I could have ordered you to take me along.
You don't exactly outrank me anymore.
In my book, experience outranks everything.
Then I definitely outrank you.
May the Force be with you.
This is like 10 seconds into the episode and I already want to cry. Thinking about Rex and Ahsoka in general makes me emotional at this point, especially after the last episode of The Clone Wars, and this conversation just really hits me over the head with it. It's the fact that they directly reference their first conversation.
If you're a captain and I'm a Jedi, then technically I outrank you, right?
In my book, experience outranks everything.
Like, oh my god, things have changed so much. They have been through so much together since then, for one thing, but they've also been through so much not together. It's staring you right in the face with Ahsoka especially. Like, she can play by Rex's rule now. She's not an inexperienced 14-year-old kid anymore. She has seen and been through so much since then, and calling back to that first conversation really drives home how much she's changed. But it also drives home, no matter how much things change, Ahsoka and Rex will always have a close bond. But it also sort of feels like trying to hold on to something that's just completely slipped away. Because Rex is sort of like, I mean he's joking, but he's like, oh, I still outrank you, kid, because experience outranks everything, and that's not gonna change. And there's a part of him that still holds on to the beginning of the war and still holds on to 14-year-old Ahsoka, but everything is different now. With this joke, experience outranks everything, that's totally in the past. Rex doesn't really outrank Ahsoka anymore. And even as a fan, I feel like a part of me doesn't want to move on from Christophsis and the plucky Padawan that rocked my young world and her loyal clone captain friend. It's tied to such deep nostalgia for me, and their stories at that time were so much simpler, and then a part of me wishes it could have stayed that way. And my story was so much simpler too. I mean, really, so then a part of you stays there at Christophsis, and that's kind of what's hanging in the air over this conversation, you know? Somewhere in between the Clone Wars movie and Twilight of the Apprentice, we grew up. They grew up. And there are moments in time that are irrevocably gone, and there are eras that you can never ever get back. And there are people and there are versions of yourself that you can never ever get back. And Rex Rex doesn't outrank Ahsoka anymore. And I think that idea is an interesting one to think about at the beginning here because of the Ahsoka versus Vader fight in part 2. I mean, if the angst over not being able to preserve a better bygone era is present anywhere in Star Wars canon, like if that concept is slapping you in the face from anywhere in Star Wars, it is right there at the Ahsoka versus Vader confrontation. And then with Rex, I like how protective he feels over Ahsoka. He's so worried about her, and it really tugs at my heartstrings. Like, they just found each other again, and they've been through so much, and now he has to let her go, and we still don't even know when or if they'll see each other again. This is the last time we see them talk in canon. Oh wow. I didn't even think about that. That hurts. Their last conversation echoes their first conversation. Oh Oh, wow. So anyway, on to Malachor. First of all, Malachor looks so sick. Look at the designs, both on the surface and underground at the temple. The temple is just visually stunning. I was marveling at it through the entire episode. The design and animation teams killed it with this one. As I was watching the episode, something about the setting was really itching at me symbolically. Like, I just felt like the design choices of Malachor and the temple had to mean something. So I dug up some notes from AP Lit, and this is what I came up with. It might be a reach, but when am I not reaching for meaning? The surface of Malachor is full of holes, and the temple is underground, which means that the events of the episode take place underground. But it starts out above the ground. They're on this empty, gray landscape, and it's very drab and dreary. But there is still a little bit of sun. That's only at the beginning, though, and the vast majority of the episodes take place underground in this expanse that eternally looks like night. In AP Lit, when we talked about stuff like this, we were talking in terms of proximity to heaven or hell. Heaven and hell aren't really things in Star Wars, so we'll go with Star Wars terms and talk about proximity to light and darkness. Before the episode takes off, the characters are still close to the light. They're above ground, but there is not a lot of light. This shows that the characters haven't yet been engulfed in darkness, but the lack of light foreshadows that they will be soon. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about comparisons. This proximity to light exists now so that we can compare the devastation and darkness that consumes them at the end with who they are here at the beginning. So then, naturally, spending the episode underground, in closer proximity to darkness, means that the episode's events immerse the characters in emotional darkness. And the juxtaposition between daylight on the surface and nighttime underground has like the same symbolism as like being above ground or being underground, you know? That seemed like a reach when I started, but you know what? I think I'm onto something. Okay, I'm just gonna point out something now that we'll come back to later.
To defeat your enemy, you have to understand them.
Not the time to talk about that yet, but just keep it in mind. Oh, okay. So there's this line. They're talking about how Malachor is an ancient battlefield and that the Jedi came to attack the temple, and Ezra's like, the Jedi won, right? And Ahsoka's like, from what I can tell, nobody won. And you know what? That is exactly how this goes. That's foreshadowing right there. 5 minutes in, and we already know how it's going to end. The Inquisitors are defeated, sure, but Maul is still gonna escape and cause some chaos later on in the series. Kanan and Ezra make it out, sure, but they've been knocked to rock bottom by the end. And Ahsoka, well, yeah. I think it's safe to say that nobody wins. And then, the moment we've all been waiting for, the return of the king.
I know where you are. You're with me. Please put your weapon away. I mean you no harm.
Oh, I was talking about Sam Witwer, but yeah, Maul. Maul is back. This episode is really about how Maul manipulates Ezra, so that's the bulk of the conversation here. Let's talk about Old Maul. Old Maul is a really cool figure. I like what they did with him. It was a really smart way for him to start manipulating Ezra and to make it believable. You know, at first, Maul does not look like the devil. We can't see him. So to Ezra, he's just old, and he's not threatening, and he even seems wise, actually. He appears almost like a Yoda figure, because he just seems like this old man who may or may not be useful. Like, it's a lot like Yoda and Luke in Empire Strikes Back. He actually kind of is this, like, dark Yoda, you know? He comes off as unassuming and old and not intimidating, but he's actually very powerful, and he's going to teach Ezra a way to be powerful as well. Maul has come a long way since the Clone Wars. He is now older and wiser and more patient, and he's more willing to be patient, which I think is really the key difference between him here and him in the Clone Wars. He is still fueled by revenge, but he's playing the long game now more than ever before. He has this incredible capacity for patience, and he also has a lot of confidence in his plan. Now, obviously, since he is fueled by revenge and the dark side, he will never win. His arrogance and his thirst for revenge will assure his failure every time. As it has been said before, he is like Sisyphus. He is always going to be pushing that boulder back up the hill, but we're not there yet. I got off track. For now, what matters is how smart Maul was to present himself this way. We understand why Ezra would trust him. Again, we can't even see his face yet. He's hiding his evilness. He's hiding. Side note, the imagery of like just his yellow eyes being clearly visible under the cloak is like, it's so sick. Like it's so cool. It's such a cool visual. Maul is so smart throughout the whole episode, actually. First, he makes sure he doesn't seem intimidating. Then he creates common ground with our rebels by showing that they share a common enemy in the Inquisitors and the Sith. And then he creates sympathy for himself with this line.
The Sith took everything from me, ripped me from my mother's arms, murdered my brother, used me as a weapon, and then cast me aside, abandoned me. Once I had power, now I have nothing. Nothing.
So now Ezra has every reason to trust him. For us, it's hard to see why Ezra would trust him at first, because we know who he is, and we're like, why would you possibly even think this guy is trustworthy? But when you actually look at the episode, it's not hard to see why Maul would come across as trustworthy to Ezra. Plus, Ezra's kind of been taught to like trust his instincts and to not judge someone based on appearances, so he's willing to give Maul the benefit of the doubt. Maul kind of reminds me of Palpatine in this episode, actually. He's this very powerful dark side user who comes across as unassuming and old and helpful, but he's actually just going to very carefully and very thoughtfully manipulate this young man and turn him to the dark side for his own benefit. I think this is interesting. There's this part where Maul says, "You want revenge," and Ezra says, "I want justice," and Maul just like waves it off like he'll easily convince Ezra that revenge and justice are the same thing. And it's just so arrogant and twisted. It's so arrogant that Maul thinks he'll be able to just totally win Ezra over that easily, and it's so dangerous to make justice and revenge the same thing. Just that little line is so telling of who Maul is. Okay, now, remember when I told you to keep in mind Ahsoka's line about needing to know an enemy to defeat them? Well, listen to what Maul says now.
To defeat your enemy, you must know your enemy.
So that's interesting, that Maul and Ahsoka said the same thing. That's just another factor into why Ezra was able to be manipulated by Maul. He's saying the same thing as Ahsoka, and they trust Ahsoka. Ahsoka's good, she's one of the good guys, like everything's getting mixed up. And then Maul continues to manipulate Ezra's trust, this time bringing concepts of the dark side actually into play.
Your anger is a wellspring, you must use it.
But a Jedi's never supposed to act out of emotion.
Your passions give you strength, and through strength you gain power. You have seen it, you feel it. You must break your chains.
Maul chooses his words very carefully when he's sort of coaching Ezra, and he makes the dark side sound like a good thing. When he's talking about Ezra using his inner power, he's talking about passion, he's talking about breaking chains, so it sounds like freedom, and he's telling Ezra that he has this power inside of him, and makes it sound like it's like a gift, like a good thing. This power inside of him that's actually just anger. He's making anger seem desirable, so Ezra gives into it. Now, Ezra is good at first. He resists at first, but he doesn't hold out for very long. Why? Well, the groundwork has all been set up throughout the season. For one thing, he's desperate, and desperation will push him to make rash choices. Also, his relationship with Kanan was getting a little loose this season, Kanan working through his own issues unfortunately created a little bit of distance between him and Ezra, and even if it's not a lot of distance, the gap is still wide enough for Maul to slip in. And we saw that distance and that friction in the previous episode. Plus, Maul is telling Ezra a lot of things that he wants to be true. Ezra has a lot of passion and anger, and I think a part of him wants to indulge in that. He knows a Jedi isn't supposed to, and I think he struggles with that. So what Maul is telling him sounds really good. I think this is a situation where someone will believe anything if it's what they want to hear. Maul is giving him permission to tap into those feelings, and I think Ezra sort of convinces himself, oh, someone's telling me it's okay to do this, so it can't be that bad. And he's isolated from Kanan right now, so there's no one to intervene. And then the following exchange solidifies that Ezra's trust in Maul has taken a step further. It's also just a really cool moment.
My name's Ezra. My real name.
Real name? Yes. I once had a real name. So long ago, I don't remember. Now I am called Maul.
So, like, first off, the official Maul reveal, the hood comes off, he growls his name like that, and it resonates like, ooh, Maul is back, baby. Fans everywhere just went crazy. But also, this is a really clear and solid point in the Maul and Ezra relationship. Sharing names is a really clear sign of trust and alliance. It reminds me of when I covered the Honorable Ones. When Zeb told Callus his name, it was an extension of friendship and an acknowledgement of trust. Now, Ezra shares his real name with Maul when he didn't at first, thus solidifying his trust. Maul removing his hood shows us how he knows he has Ezra under his thumb. He had to hide it at first because, you know, he looks like an actual demon. But now it doesn't matter who or what he is. Ezra trusts him now. So he can look like anything and he can be anyone. It doesn't matter. He already has Ezra under his thumb. And now for the retrieval of the holocron. Maul says that only someone willing to risk oblivion will be able to retrieve it. And Ezra's just like, yeah, sounds good, which is really concerning. To cross the chasm separating them from the holocron, Ezra suggests that they use a move that he and Kanan do together, and they successfully carry that out. So that shows how much Maul has closed in on Ezra, and it's a symbol for what sort of figure Maul could potentially become for Ezra. Mentorship is on the table now. It goes further than simply being trust. And when Ezra gets the holocron, he has to exercise trust in Maul by jumping over the chasm and trusting Maul to catch him. When Maul catches Ezra, he pulls him over the cliff and he pulls him up by the hand holding the holocron. So there's this really striking image of Maul saving Ezra, but actually holding on to the holocron, and it really effectively communicates the idea that Maul is just using Ezra to get to the holocron. It's a great visual right there. And then, the last few seconds of the episode.
Kanan! Ahsoka! I brought help!
Maul.
The shadow.
What fun! What fun!
It's so funny that Ezra's like, guys, I brought help, and the camera cuts to Maul. As they say. It's ironic. And then that last moment, the what fun, the laugh, it's like a switch was flipped. Now that's the Maul we know. Sam Witwer is so great. This half of Twilight of the Apprentice is a real slow burn, and I love it for that. This isn't a super action-packed episode, or at least everything that feels important isn't very action-packed. The arrival to Malachor, the examination of its history, Maul manipulating Ezra, it all took its time, and I think that was necessary. The emotions run so high in the second part that the tension had to build gradually in the first part. Like, they could not just rush into this. I especially like the time taken with Maul and Ezra. That definitely needed a whole episode to develop, or else it would have been kind of hard to believe. That's what I've got for part 1, but part 2 is where everything really goes down, so keep an eye out. Exciting times, exciting times. Until then, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you always.